I saw just saying that you may have to work on your coolness because, I'm showing up with a hoodie and you look like you're about to shoot an Abercrombie and Fitch commercial. I mean, it's like,
Well, I have to dress up, because my natural coolness can't cut it. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day that the 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 idea of creating a false persona of yourself via your exterior versus your inner self coming out via your exterior, how much care you put into your exterior self. Um, but we were talking about it kind of in the sense of being an actor and that you're creating a persona.
mm,
And whether that persona is a false persona that you're creating for the benefit of others, or whether that is a true persona that you've created because that is your vision of yourself. I mean, those are different things.
yes.
And those aren't the only two options. And there's a huge spectrum of
I,
that,
I think you're all over the spectrum when it comes to this. Like, I really do.
I accept that. And I'm
You
willing.
should.
We were laughing about it because I made the claim that I live theatrically, and they're like, "Oh, yes, you do." Just like
Yes.
the whole life is theater, which I don't think is, once again, I don't think that's living falsely. I think that is uh it's just a way of interpreting life. I mean, Shakespeare famously said, all the world's a stage and all of us are but players.
Yeah.
And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he says, we each have our exits and entrances and things like that. And that's true to life. That's true to anything. We enter and exit other people's lives. We enter and exit this world in general. And this time that we're here, the time that we have upon the stage, we can choose to be a background player with few or no lines, or we can choose to be center stage. Give me the spotlight. Give me all the lines. Give me give me the drama. Speaking of, I don't think I told you this. Your dream has come true. I'm directing a play.
No.
Yeah. Um, this did not come about because this was not my thing. Another actress here in town, a very accomplished and very amazing actress. Shannon and I have made friends with this person, and her name is Elizabeth. So I don't have to keep referring to her as this person.
Okay.
Uh, but Elizabeth was speaking to Shannon, and she said, I've always wanted to do this play. It's called Night Mother. It's this Pulitzer winning play from like 1984. It's super heavy. It's it's gut wrenching. It's a real. It's one of those plays that you put a big M on it. Don't bring the kids.
Ah.
Not because there's anything inappropriate, but the subject matter is suicide.
Mm.
So anyway, there's only two parts. There is an elderly mother and her adult daughter. And Elizabeth asked Shannon, "Would you consider doing this play with me and being the daughter, and I'll be the mother?" And Shannon was like, "Oh, we should do it." And then Shannon said, "We should get Eli to direct it." And so Shannon came back to me with this, and I said, I paused, and I said, I asked her, "Can we live in the same house if I'm directing you?"
And can all the people involved in this, do they understand what this means?
Yeah. Well, okay. So what's interesting about it, we've had one read through. The show is going on at the end of April, and we don't really start rehearsing in earnest for um, another 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
And but what we did is I said, because it was so funny because I told you this in a previous episode we did, I said there are certain aspects of being a director that I think I'd be really good at. And there's other aspects of it, scheduling, just all the practical stuff that I think I'd be terrible at. Well, we happen to know somebody who has been an assistant director on several productions here in town that are really good, and we know this person, and she's hugely capable. Uh, so we said, well, let's bring her in as an assistant director. Well, and then she and I start talking, and her name is Bryn. So Bryn and I start talking, and we're shooting ideas around. And I said, Bryn, let's just call ourselves co-directors because you're going to contribute so much to this, and I want you. And Bryn was asking. She was really asking to kind of define her role a little bit. She's like, am I going to be stepping on toes? Am I going to be doing, blah, blah, blah. And I said, Bryn, I want everything. So so I'm co-directing a play is what I should say.
Okay.
Bryn is an A personality. Shannon's an A personality. They are like in front of everything, and here's me. And I'm a very ponderous personality. So at our first read through, I'm just listening. We finished the read through and we're starting to have the discussion about it. And I'm just listening. I just want to hear what everybody has to say. And Shannon was worried that people would think that I'm just not engaged. I'm just very passive, And it's like, no, I think when people are in a position like being a director or something like that, they can't wait to hear their own voice say their vision. But if I'm going to pat myself on the back about anything, I can say, I don't really have that kind of ego. And I really want to hear what other people have to say before I start, putting, just and then I'll begin my whole manipulation of the situation.
Well, yeah. I
But
mean,
it'll be subtle.
just have to listen to this podcast episode every 2 weeks. They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You want to know how Simon's going to be? Just check out the movie reviews. Gonna rip it apart. I envision you just sitting there and you're just like, oh.
Well, luckily, like I say, there's Elizabeth and Shannon, and both of them are very capable. And already in that first reading, Elizabeth is just bringing it. She's, when I participate in a first reading, yeah, I'm trying things out, whatever, but she's just full on weeping,
Wow.
really bringing the emotion. So those are the kind of actors I'm working with. And then my co-director, Bryn, is just one of the most capable people you'd ever meet. And so there's not a lot of room for me to be overly critical, unfortunately, much to your dismay, I'm sure.
I'm sure this is bothering you. I mean,
Yeah. Just like, well, crap, man. Who am I going to tear down?
right. This is the normal Simon thing.
Yeah. And the script is so good. I wouldn't have agreed to do it if it was trash, if it was just
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't think so. And Shannon wouldn't have wanted to do it either if it was.
Yeah.
And I actually did a couple of things. So there's a movie that was made of it back in the 80s. And certain people who are involved, including the owner and producer of at the Playhouse that we're putting it on, which is a cool place. It's actually a movie studio, but they have a live stage where they have concerts and put on shows. So anyway, so people wanted to maybe sit and do like a viewing of the film. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that.
This is such a Simon thing. No, I'm not doing
Yeah.
No.
I just said I don't want my ideas cluttered with their ideas. And I don't want to be sitting around comparing what we're doing to what they did. I've never seen this show. I had never read the script. In fact, I held off on reading the script until our first reading I wanted to just hear them say the lines.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference, you know. I mean, reading something like take Shakespeare for example. Reading Shakespeare is a very different experience from hearing Shakespeare and watching Shakespeare and having an amazing actor interpret Shakespeare for you or to you. Um, all of those things are valid, both reading and watching and listening. But I wanted to see the our two actors deliver the lines, and I just didn't want to go into it with a lot of because this wasn't my idea, right? I was kind of if I had come and said, "Oh, I want to do a play and I want to direct this play," of course I would have been all over that script and I would have it memorized before the actors did. But but since this was something that they kind of asked me to do, I was like, well, I don't want to come in with all these preconceived ideas so that when the actors say their lines, I'm like, that's not how I imagined it. You know what I mean? So I wanted the actors to present the lines to me. Now I'm just imagining them doing it. I'm not imagining anybody else doing it. I'm not imagining any other way that it's been said. And we can kind of go from there. Anyway, I just thought that would be a fun way for me to approach it.
Yeah, and that's such a you thing to approach it. It's like Hollywood producers, you understand this is a masterclass Simon is putting on. He cannot be diluted in how he goes about his directorial methodology.
Oh man. Yeah. Like I say, Shannon was kind of worried that, other people would think I'm just not. So I actually had to give Bryn a list just recently. I was like, hey, okay, here's stuff I'm working on just because I'm very quiet about things. I'm not somebody who gives, I'm not posting updates about my movements all the time. I'm just quietly going about my thing. And well, sometimes when you're working with a team, that's not the best way to
It's not
go.
ideal, Simon.
So, I just gave her a little list of things I'm working on. And sometimes when I say working on, so Bryn's personality, when she says she's working on it, that means she's got a computer or a pad and paper in front of her and she's physically working on it. When I say I'm working on it, oftentimes what I mean is I'm contemplating it. I'm
Of
pondering it
course.
in my mind. And once I kind of have some idea of what I really want for whatever I'm working on, let's say it's a piece of music. Once I kind of really have an idea, I've kind of wrapped my brain around what I want to actually accomplish. Then I go in and I just gung ho and start knocking it out.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, this is kind of like that too.
Yeah. These people better be ready.
I hope they're ready um just to have really deep conversations about the play
Yeah.
and not to have me overly um to over direct them. And if anything, I want to under direct them and over discuss the play,
Yeah.
if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, it does make sense. It actually makes me think about the things I've been thinking about. You always have these thoughts in between these 2 weeks that we have these episodes. I'm having all these conversations, and today we're going to talk about aliens. But I kind of thought in my mind, like, this is kind of a gods and aliens conversation that we're going
Mm.
to kind of move into because I listened to a few podcasts about the potential existence of life and other places besides Earth. And then I thought of this movie, and I thought this Simon's like the best person to talk to this about.
Well, you released something this morning
I
about
did.
God. I
I
haven't had,
did.
I didn't get a chance to listen to it this
Oh
morning.
man, Simon, this is your series. It is
Yeah.
called For the Lust of God. And I came up with that title. Pretty pumped
Oh,
about it.
interesting. Yeah, I
And
like
it's
it.
Yeah, it's three women's firsthand accounts of being born into, growing up in, and escaping a sex cult, the children of God.
Wow. Wow.
Took me a
Wow.
year to work on the whole thing. It's a year-long project of gathering the interviews, creating
Mm.
music, intros, just everything, like just really making it sound amazing and making it in, grabbing clips from things. Um, and I even put on it like, hey, this could be very triggering because some of the explanations of growing up, the commentary are they're difficult to hear.
See, what you're moving into now is journalism.
Right.
Seriously, um, there's a huge difference between having a conversation with somebody on a podcast
Yeah.
and doing real journalism.
Right.
What it sounds like you're doing is journalism, and to me, that's very impressive.
Thank you. I like to think that these conversations inspire me. Like I'm trying to shop this other series. It's called Me versus Me, and it's a one-off, just one episode of people's external way they feel about themselves. Let's say this, let's bring it to this play that you're doing, directing.
Mhm.
Like, man, you feel confident, you're gonna go in there, do your Simon thing, but then the inner monologue of like, will I actually be good at this? Like the doubts that you have that you don't share with other people, the me versus me.
Yeah,
And just telling stories, having people tell their stories of how confident they are, but how painfully not confident they are at the same time as for that.
that's really interesting. I just recently touched on this subject when I did a photo shoot for a United Way event, and
Mm,
so I was the event photographer,
yeah.
and so I'm doing, I don't know how many edits, at least
Yeah.
100 edits, and giving it back to them. And as I'm going through that process, well, Shannon, people really liked them. People were sharing them all over Facebook and stuff. I know that because I kept getting tagged in things,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people just like, oh, who shot this? These are great, blah blah blah, and I was very happy about that. But when I handed the photos in to them, I went to the United Way office here locally, and they're wonderful people, and they asked me if I would sit with them in the conference room while they just go through them on this big screen. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
In that moment, I'm very confident in my abilities, but you can be the best photographer in the world and still not capture what the client envisioned.
Yeah.
So those moments when you're sitting there live with them, you're just like, oh man, are they gonna like this? Are they
Yeah.
gonna did I capture what they really wanted out of this? Luckily it all went great, but I was talking about it to Shannon later, and I told, and she was laughing about that. She's like, why would you have any doubts? Your photos are always top notch, and people always think they're just amazing, and I'm like, very complimentary, and that's great. But I was telling her, it's like, even in the process of editing photos, I'm on this roller coaster ride of I get to one photo, I'm like, this is I'm so good.
Yeah.
I'm so amazing.
Right.
And then I click to the next photo. I'm like, I'm the worst photographer ever.
Right.
I'm nothing. Nobody should hire me. Nobody should pay me. I should give the money back, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's this kind of duality of thoughts that we spend so much time pumping up all the things we're doing that's really good on, especially on social media. I mean, it's like people are, hey, this is where I went, this is what I did, this is what job I got. We often don't put any thought or merit into like people saying like, I don't really know if I'm that good at this thing I'm doing. Actually, I kind of question myself. It's like I want people to hear that inner dialogue and not just the outer dialogue about it, the me versus me element. We do that with everything.
Saying that this is popular is probably not a good way to put it, but one thing I've noticed on my very limited time on social media
Mm-hmm.
is there have been a few people, at least, and this is anecdotal, so I don't know how popular it is, but it seems to be popular, at least within whatever pops up first on my social media, is people sharing grief.
Mm.
I found that really interesting.
Yeah.
People sharing their grief process, actually taking selfies of them crying,
Yeah.
of
I've seen this.
themselves,
Yeah.
you know. And I just thought, well, that I have mixed feelings about it.
Simon, let me stop you there. I have very mixed feelings about it. And this is going to sound unpopular. I don't know whether it's authentic or not. That's my problem with. I'm not sure if it's like a thirst trap or if it's real authenticity. And I don't know how can I even judge that on one sense
Yeah,
because it's how they may say, "How dare you say that?" because this is me doing it. But the internet's a funny place, man. It's a
it does funny things to your mind.
yes.
So I would never question that the feelings that they have that they are sharing are real. I would never doubt that whatsoever. But the motivation behind sharing them, isn't that what we're
Yeah,
maybe getting at?
that's really the crux of it is what is the reason to share this? Is it for attention or is it the lesson behind the grief? I don't know. Like,
I don't know either. And here's what maybe something interesting. What would happen? Would we have mixed emotions if they wrote a book about their process
mm,
rather than taking
mm,
a selfie?
I'd probably think differently about it. I know I would think differently about it. Yeah.
So maybe that speaks to the social media kind of trivializes things
Mm,
to people like us. Maybe to
yeah,
other people it doesn't. Maybe to other people talking about something on social media does not trivialize it, but for you and me it kind of
it
does.
does. Yeah, no, it just really does. I don't know. There's something about it. There's a wall for me
Yeah.
with it. And I know when you said that, I was like, I feel like we're similar on this. There's just something off about it. It's like always starts out with the same one sentence, space, one sentence, space, one sentence. Seriously, this is the like playbook
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, we had a bad time, one sentence, but this creates resilience, one sentence, space. Anybody listen to this, you know what I'm talking about. And that does, it just, I'm like, this seems like premeditated. It's like,
It does. And it feels like they saw that somebody else do the same thing. So they're
yeah,
copying, pasting that formula, which once again feels like it has trivialized
yes,
the experience they're sharing to one extent or another.
yeah. Yeah, it just yeah, it's just strange to me. But I think that I like telling stories from not being part of the story, like audio wise. Like I'm not actually doing like directing, and like I'm directing the people. We're doing hey, I'm gonna keep this in. Hey, what about this? I'm asking questions, and then the final product becomes this is like my best work ever for sure, like this for lust of God.
Amazing.
I think it's literally one of the best things I've ever done in my life, hands down. Like,
I can't wait to listen to it.
it's your thing. It has a theatrical Simon feel to it. It's like actually when I listened to it back the other day, I was like, this kind of feels like Simon's podcast on some level. And I started doing this well before
uh,
then, but it
oh
kind of
yeah.
feels like that with people telling their stories. And it just made me start thinking about just like our place in the universe and the stories we tell. And what I was trying to say is like I was listening to this podcast about a person talking about this scientist talking about the statistical probability of life on other planets, like intelligent life.
Mm, yeah.
And then this other podcaster saying that he had never given thought that we may be alone. Like he had never postulated this ever. He never gave
Mm,
it any thought. He says it has always been an impossibility in his mind. But the other scientist said, I think if you're going to look at it objectively, you have to think about both of these things, you know.
yeah. You know, in a universe of endless possibility, everything can and does happen. That's something that I postulated in one of my podcast episodes, that if you have an infinite universe of things happening, therefore an infinite number of things can happen. That means an infinite number of things do happen.
Mm,
So, to your point, in this infinite number of possibilities, one of those possibilities is that we are completely alone as far as intelligent life goes in the entire universe, known and unknown.
Right.
And then there's that other possibility that there are higher life forms, lower life forms, all kinds of intelligent life forms out there that, we have not discovered yet.
And may never discover.
And may
That's a
never discover.
possibility too. It's like, and you think about the movie Aliens, while it's a movie, the possibility could be that there is a planet like that. And there are aliens who are acidy spit
Yeah.
and have evolved in a different way. I guess it could be a possibility. I don't know, but it could be a possibility that planet LV, whatever it's, I can't remember the actual name, does not exist for that. And I think sometimes that's like the fantasy. Sometimes people want to be right so much. They look at the Drake equation and they go, oh, there must be billions of intelligent civilizations out there. Like you want that to be so true that you will not allow yourself to believe that the other thing could be true also.
Yeah. I mean, even taking that from a religious perspective, because, so one of the number one problems I have with religiosity is not considering that there couldn't be a God. That,
Right.
is talking to a religious person and postulating that, well, there might not be one,
Right.
and having them be like, how dare you? How dare you,
Dare
sir?
you?
Have we spoken since I actually said that in front of a group of Christians?
No, no.
Okay, so roughly 2 weeks ago, it was on a Thursday, so it must have been the next day after our last
Right.
recording. Um, I'm in a wonderful meeting, and it's put on by the head of the local Methodist congregation here, and he puts on a once monthly thing. It's open to anybody. It's actually put on at a brewery. Brewery. That's a tough word for some reason, but and he puts it on there so that anybody can feel like, this is a space where you can come, and it is called Crafted Conversations. And so
Yeah.
he brings up a topic, and I might have told you about it before, but anyway, the conversation this past time was about loss. And a question that he posed to the whole group is, what is something that you have lost but you gave up intentionally, and that led to opportunities in your life for growth? And there's some good answers. There's some very thoughtful people there, but my point is that at least 90% of them are believers, and true believers, you know. And I'm listening to people, and at first I'm kind of like, I shouldn't say what I'm going to say.
This is such a
And then I
Simon
was,
thing.
but then I thought, I'm saying it, and I make my comment. My comment was basically this: that I decided to start living my life as if there is no God. There was audible gasps in the room, and Shannon and I were laughing about it later. Like, people in that room could not believe that somebody would actually do that. But I said, here's the caveat, though, is that by doing that, by doing what we talked about actually the day before, and that must have been inspired some of the things I said.
Mm.
I said, by putting humanity before divinity, I've now come around to actually living the teachings of Jesus much better than I was before, when I was putting divinity before humanity, when I was more worried about pleasing God than loving my neighbor.
Yeah.
And there were some very thoughtful people in that room that actually gave one guy behind me, he was just like, oh wow. Yeah.
You like blew his mind. It was like,
Yeah. It was like, okay.
okay.
And there was a wonderful guy who had an extended conversation with me after the meeting. It was a doctor, a very intelligent guy, and he expressed to me that he was kind of like in a similar space.
Yeah.
And so he asked me, "So have you decided that there just is no God?" And I told him, "Well, that would kind of, ruin the experiment, I think,
Yeah, I
to
think
make
so. Yeah.
to make a final decision and say there absolutely is no God. Once again, in an infinite universe, I have to leave the possibility open that there is a God, that Jesus is my savior and things like that. And then on the other hand, I don't have to make that the focal point of my life day after day. I can actually make the people who are here with me the focal point of my life. And in doing so, actually be a better Christian.
Yeah.
By being an atheist, I can be a better Christian.
Oh man, this is wild stuff, man. We always come to wild stuff, you know that? It's like I'm sure it's just like I told Michelle, my wife, right after we had it, I said, this was a pretty special conversation about looking at humanity and divinity. For those of you who didn't listen last time, I would highly encourage you to go back because this is a connection episode. It feels like they connect together for
Yeah.
that. And I don't think she had thought about it that way either. And she like gave me, that look someone gives you when they're just like it infects their brain and they had never
Yeah.
thought about it. And it just like their face contorts. They're like, it never came across before. A lot of thoughts are the same. You're like, okay, I got it. Yeah, it's like I
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
When it's not the same, it like does something to you, it hits you weirdly in your mind. And there's this weird pause you get. And I said, yeah, obviously, um, I love my relationship and my faith in God, but I think that turning it this way will makes me a better person in it. It makes me appreciate divinity better when I focus on it from this point of view.
Yeah. It's I love how you described that because I think that is the natural reaction our brain has when maybe too many synapses are firing at the same time.
Yeah.
Is something like that. There's
Yeah.
just like we have been confronted with something that may I think those are the moments. What I'm trying to say is those are the moments in my life. I think when I've come across something that is true, but I didn't want it to be in the moment.
Mm.
And I had to wrestle with it and come back to it later and be like, okay, all right, I have to. And I mean, gosh, on a spiritual journey, how many times have I run into that in my life where I'm just like, oh gosh, all the stuff that I grew up thinking and believing, I have to just shrug off because I've been confronted with better ideas.
Yeah.
That's just all there is to it.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. And when I'm confronted with better ideas, no matter how uncomfortable they are, I can't go back to the old ones. I
Yeah.
just can't.
Yeah. And I think that's the funniest part about that, I think, is if you actually understand the teaching of Jesus, I think that's how he wanted it. Like we just cocked it up, man. Humans like played phone tag and they just started making it a weird situation. They told the 25th person and it was nothing like the beginning version of it. That's what it feels like,
Well, I mean, when we understand that Christianity was literally invented, and it was invented not by a group of people who agreed, but it was invented by a very diverse people who all believed in Jesus, but that was kind of the only thing they had in common. And
Yeah.
in so many other ways, they believed so differently about all the other things about who Jesus actually was, is, and so on and so forth. And it was only because of Constantine, really, that we have the version of Christianity that we have today. It was only because of a guy who really didn't care about Jesus,
Yeah.
but used Jesus for political gain. I mean, that, I don't know if that's irony. It might not be, but that situation, let's just say, should haunt Christians everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, the version of Christianity that we are comfortable with today, the image of Jesus that we're comfortable, by and large, we are comfortable with today in the mainstream, is just a product of, you know, political power. I mean,
Yeah.
and I don't want to say that in a way that it completely dilutes the message of Christianity and things like that, because I think the messaging mostly survived, even if we're ignoring it. But it's there.
It's there.
It's there in the New Testament. Whether the Gospels agree with each other or not, in many regards, some of the most basic messages, some of which were added later, some of which are not original to the Gospels themselves.
Yeah.
I love sharing this one because I think it's, to me, it's the most important story about Jesus, and it's the one where the woman's taken in adultery.
Yes.
Have we talked about this?
A little bit. We talked a little bit about it. Yeah.
And Jesus is writing in the dirt. Well, the people are saying,
Mm-hmm.
should we stone her or not? And Jesus says, he who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. We did talk about this, and
Yeah.
Jesus is inviting himself because
Right.
he's saying, I'm the one without sin, right?
Yeah.
And then he says to the woman, go thy way. He asks, where are those who condemn you, or whatever? She's like, they're gone. It's like, neither do I condemn you.
Yeah.
Neither do I condemn you. That message is added later. It's not original to that gospel. And that should tell us everything we need to know about Christianity right there, is that we're making this up as we go along. But the fact that that story is most likely a complete fiction, but they felt the need to add it, that is what's important. It's not important that Jesus literally said and did these things. The message is what's important. And the message is, neither do I condemn you.
Yep.
And if Christianity could just wrap its head around that one message,
I know.
it'd all be roses, man.
I mean, most definitely. And I think there's that's why I think I was really like thinking about when we're going to talk about. It's like I just start popping in my mind gods and aliens. But you could basically be like science and spirituality. I mean, the search for
Yeah.
extraterrestrial life in many ways for people is a search to disprove another thing, that this is just common. This is common. Like you and me, we're just common. Like this is common everywhere across the billions of galaxies and stuff. Almost this dogged pursuit to not just for curiosity of what's out there, but like to prove something else is completely foolish for that. That I don't like that pursuit. I just like, why can't there be possibilities on both sides? These things. And I never, like I was telling my wife the other day, I said, what's interesting, and maybe you've seen this when you maybe watch videos where like an atheist argues with a Christian, right? And it often is
Mm-hmm.
like trying to like prove that God exists. That's a terrible argument to me to try to, you can't prove that. And you can't prove
Yeah.
it the other way either. It's like, but the better story is, how does this actually make me feel as a person? How do I live my life? How do I live feeling this way versus, is this true or not? I mean, we're both
Yeah.
not going to get there, like ultimately.
Most, and what most, at least those who follow the, Jewish Christian tradition. So we're working from the Old and New Testaments. They're using those scriptures and those stories to try and prove that God exists. Well, it's like, but those stories were made up, man.
Oh. Doesn't
You
prove
know what I
anything
mean?
about the existence. I mean,
It's like, um, and anybody who knows anything about ancient cultures, they know that history and mythology are the same thing to those cultures. So, and we're talking about tribal gods. We're not talking about. So I just had this conversation the other night with somebody. It was just that. So just I've always liked to point that out, because I like to point out that these conversations are happening everywhere.
yeah.
And people who are actually thinking profoundly, they're asking these questions. And then you and I have this opportunity to just sit here and flesh them out.
Yeah.
So what this other person and I were just kind of touching on was that, the idea, and please don't anybody take this as an anti-Semitic rant, because it's not at all. But the idea that the ancient Israelites and the Jewish people are the chosen people and the light of the world that the Hebrew Bible claims them to be, but then most of the world's population throughout the history of the world has never heard of them. How can you be the light to the world? How can you be God's chosen people to set the example for the rest of the world if most of the rest of the world has never even heard of you or seen you or knows what you've done and knows what your relationship to God is? To me, that's just, if that's how God works, then he's terrible at his job. He's absolutely terrible at his job. And those are the things where, when you just start looking at it in a very logical way, instead of with your own belief bias. Well, I grew up believing this, or I had a warm, fuzzy feeling in my heart, so I know it's true. Well, I get warm, fuzzy feelings in my heart all the time, and it doesn't mean they're true. It means I've been emotionally manipulated. If I'm watching a movie, I know what's happening in the movie is complete fiction, but I still get that feeling. So why can't we just apply that to our religiosity as well? It's like, this doesn't have to be true for me to get a warm feeling about it and for me to get something from the metaphor, so that I can take that metaphor and apply it to my life without having to say, oh, this is definitely the only way anything could have happened.
Yeah. Right. I think that's why I think this important, is this exchange of like hashing it out type of thing. And what's interesting is, if you take like a very hard look at how we speak about this, it's probably confusing on some level for someone who's not open-minded about it. They're like, these two people seem like they're just veering away from this hard. That's not true. At least I can speak for myself. I actually think it's pulling me closer towards it.
Yeah.
I'm just changing, like the humanity divinity to me is a huge inflection point for me. I was like, oh, okay. This frees me from a very tight, very legalistic version of this, where I can get different sources of information to reach a similar conclusion, and not have be like, well, I have to do this. I have to go to this church every week to get the right version. Like, it frees you from that. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't mean you're not into it. It frees you from that version of it on some level.
So here's spoilers for the podcast episode I'm currently working on. It'll be the next one I release. Um, I'm talking about paradigm shifts.
Mm.
When we get locked into something, whether it be a philosophy, a religion, even a scientific truth, and we're just locked into it.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the truth. It's the absolute truth. Nothing can veer us away from it. Then you will not be prepared for the paradigm shift.
Yeah.
I'm bringing it up into my episode to talk about masculinity and these straight men, young men who are normally our age or younger, between like 18 and yours and my age.
Yeah.
And they're feeling disenfranchised. They're having less sex. Um, I read an amazing statistic, and I can't remember the numbers, but it was talking about how many prisons have been built in California in the last 10 years versus how many universities.
Mm.
I think that's an amazing statistic to think about because there was only one university that was new university, but there was a bunch of prisons.
Yeah.
So what's happening to our young men? And when you're talking about education, young women are vastly superior. They're finishing their education at a much
Yeah.
higher rate. They're getting better grades. So in my mind, I'm sitting there thinking, initially my messaging to young men is to say, women don't need you. And that's why you feel disenfranchised, because you're useless to them in a practical way.
Right.
So the only thing that you can do that can be useful to them is become a person that they actually want around, even if they don't need you.
Mm.
But if you're still locked into the old paradigm where the patriarchy runs the house, where you need to earn more money than she does, where you need to be the one who has the final say in a decision about you as a couple or as a family. If you're still locked into those types of paradigms, those women don't need you and they don't want you.
Yeah.
And that's why you're disenfranchised.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to this one, man. It's a really good one.
So my point in just saying that is that, just like I said, it's like, man, the moment you free yourself from those absolutes, now you can shift with the paradigm as the paradigm changes.
Yes.
And that is such a good feeling. It is such a good feeling to be able to open a book of scientific literature and learn something that I had no clue about prior to that, and be able to just say, that's amazing and that's awesome. And I can just go with that.
Yeah.
And then maybe the following year, have another piece of scientific literature that says, actually, that old thought was wrong
Yeah.
because we've learned this since then, and be able to say, that's amazing. How cool that we have learned and we've moved on from the old thought to a better thought.
Yeah. Most definitely.
But a lot of, especially religious people, want to use that to say science doesn't know what it's talking about because it learned from prior ideas that were
Yeah.
incorrect.
Yeah. Which is strange too, because if you look back, religion and science, there's a lot of connection there, actually. A huge
Yeah.
amount of connection to religion and science and hypotheses about things. It's just we just kind of lost in translation. Like I look at like there's a growing amount of evidence, growing indication among physicists that space and time are an illusion. That sounds crazy on its surface. Like
Mm.
what? Space and time are an illusion?
Yeah.
That sounds very fringy. We're going down a weird hole. But these are like very serious science people who are like, you know, I mean, quantum entanglement is essentially saying that the universe is a oneness. There's a oneness, and that everything that is occurring is actually like our idea of space and time is actually just kind of made up. It's an illusion, and that everything is working together, and everything, and there's living and dying and growth and all these strange occurrences, but everything is a oneness. Like they kept going back to this oneness. I'm like, sounds pretty spiritual to me. I'm
Yeah.
like,
I it, I love that our the best of our most recent science fiction is dealing with this type of thing. Whether you're talking about was it called Intergalactic? No, that's the Beastie Boys song.
I do
What's
like the song. All right.
yeah? What's the one where the dad leaves his
Oh,
family?
Interstellar. Yeah.
Interstellar.
Yeah.
Interstellar deals with this kind of idea of, well, it takes time being a relative to gravity,
Right.
and that scientific truth, and then goes to the event horizon and says, oh well, gravity is so crazy here, now you can be everywhere,
Right.
you know at once. And that's just an amazing concept. It's like it it's too high of a concept for us to visualize.
Yeah.
That's why I think so many of us were confused at the end of that movie when he's inside an infinite bookcase. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And I will freely admit that I didn't get it when on my first viewing, and
Yeah.
I'm not claiming that I totally get it now,
Right.
but I can at least conceptualize it.
Yeah.
Uh, and then we have something. What's the one called with Amy Adams, The Arrival or
The
something?
Arrival. Yeah. Yeah.
The idea of the circle and seeing all space and time at the same time.
At the same time. Yeah.
That's kind of how I think most Christians have to view God as an omnipotent, all-knowing being,
Yeah.
that they are seeing all space and time at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, quantum entanglement seems to just go right along with.
It does. And quantum mechanics. And it's the funny thing about it is for me is like the science and the spirituality, they just go hand in hand to me. I think they
Yeah,
originally were meant to be hand in hand, but we started like making them separate, and that one can't be true and one must be true, the whole thing. But if we really think about it, there's so much mystery out there, and then I heard another scientist say that what's really interesting is like it almost seems like the Earth was created for the very right conditions for all these things to have, like it was put there for everything to be just right. Again, I'm like, these are crossing into realms of spirituality and science together. I just think they go together. Like, and I think they both reveal something very special that both sides are not willing to let happen on some level.
I think it's really important to remember that most of the big ideas, scientific ideas, at least that come from out of Europe and America, most of that science was done by Christians.
Exactly. Like
So,
Galileo, I think, was a Christian, I believe. And
you know,
like nobody knows that, by the way. Not a lot of
yeah.
people know that.
But it's just like Darwin was a Christian. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's just
it's like
like,
that's not put
but
out there though.
yeah. So, but we think that these ideas fly in the face of Christianity, and they do, in as much as you have to if you're going to believe in God, when you're faced with scientific truth, you have to rethink how God did it.
Yes. Yes.
That's the only argument there. If you believe in God, so we don't have to sit around arguing, does God exist or does he not exist? Why don't you just argue? And when I say argue, what I really mean is discuss and exchange ideas, how he did it. That one of my biggest frustrations is with people who just say, they want to read the first chapter of the Gospel of John and say, well, he just said it and it happened. I'm just like, that's such,
Yeah.
pardon my language, but that's such bullshit. It's like, I'm sorry, but that's just not how anything
Yeah.
works. And I don't care how omnipotent and how all powerful a being is. You don't just say something and it happens. I mean,
Yeah.
for one thing, for a being who's all powerful and completely omnipotent, their version of saying something has to be so different from ours. So, they're not even breathing the same air as we are.
Yeah.
So when we say that God speaks something into existence, it's a freaking metaphor.
It's a freaking metaphor.
Can you just not wrap your brain around that the fact is that we're dealing with metaphor here?
Yeah.
And that's John's way of saying, I actually don't know how he did it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of I don't know. I mean, if you talk to any physicist, astronomer, who's any worth their salt, they will tell you there's just not a lot of actual information about the beginning of anything, of time. It's a theory, but the information is actually not there. So you're practicing a faith too. And
The
this is
Big
what,
Bang came
right.
from a Christian scientist. The idea of the Big Bang came from somebody who believed in God and was trying to figure out how God did it.
Right.
But then you have all these Christians who want to say the Big Bang is, a bunch of nonsense. And it's like, well, it actually might be. It's just one theory.
It might be. Exactly.
But it's somebody's theory about how God did it.
Simon, I love how you we're just figuring out how did God do this shit. It wasn't like a Superman breath blow. I mean, it was just like,
oh gosh, yeah. Well, I tell you, I mean, the surest way to lose somebody like myself, who, and I think like yourself, who thinks of things in a logical way, who takes ideas to their eventual conclusion as far as we can with the knowledge that we have. When you start saying stuff like that to us, oh, God just spoke it into existence, we were all just thoughts that God had that appeared, and just, stuff like that I've heard countless Christians say. I'm just like, if that's what Christianity is, I'm out, man.
Simon's
I mean, seriously, I get so frustrated with it.
Well, it's the same thing as I get frustrated on the opposite end. If it's like, if it's not God, okay, it's the universe. And the universe brought this to me. Was it like Uber? I mean, how does that happen? Like, was it DoorDash? No, I just want to know, like
Uber creation.
Uber, yeah, this whole manifestation thing is a big kick right now. It's like, okay, like, so you sat in your house and you manifest, the universe brought you this amazing job. Like you did nothing, like you did literally nothing. And you, like, I don't know, like, is that how it works? It's like I ordered some pizza and then the universe gave me a $200,000 a year job. It's like, just want to know, is this sentient? Is the hydrogen, nitrogen, is all this, like, is that what's doing it? Like,
Yeah.
let's get to it. Like, let's just, I'm not trying to be me. I just want to know, like, how do you explain it? Because I can't explain the beginning of the universe. I believe God exists, but I definitely don't know how he did it. I really don't know. The Big Bang's a theory, but a scientist can't tell me either that they know. Like, come on. Like,
if I'm much more comfortable imagining a God with a fusion reactor than a God who just says things and they happen.
Yeah.
I'm much more comfortable with a God who travels the universe in an interstellar space vehicle of some kind and knows how to use wormholes and things like that than somebody who's just in everything and of everything. This is like, come on, guys. I mean, that's just me, but if you describe God to me as a scientist, then you've piqued my interest. If you describe God to me as, a great magician, who just snaps his fingers and things happen, and a moral lawgiver, then I'm kind of on the outs with you.
Yeah.
Especially the moral lawgiver part, actually. I gotta say, I probably have even more problem with describing God as a moral lawgiver than I do with God snapping his fingers and things just happen.
This isn't, I don't know. It just like, it's basically the Thanos theory, right? I mean, it's like, you got the stones, and you
Yeah.
got the time stone. You got the, why is
I mean, it's all mythology, man. It's just all
like
mythology. And if somebody comes up to me and they say, I don't know who God is and I don't know how God did it. Um, but I really want to have a conversation about it and exchange ideas, then I'm just like, yes,
yes.
yes, let's do it. But the moment somebody says, I know who God is and I know what he said and I know what he wants, then I'm like, really? Oh, wow. Well, it's getting late.
It's getting
I
late.
gotta run. I gotta
I've
run.
been had to go somewhere.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's good. I was just saying this to my wife. I was like, I just think that's part of the whole thing is like questioning. I think this is a very old school, and especially in the Black community, very old school, like, oh, you don't question God. You don't question Jesus. I'm like, okay, I think we got to turn this around. It's like, I actually think he wants us to question how this all happened, because I think the questioning actually brings you closer to it. I'm of that mind, for at least for me. It has brought
Yeah.
me, it is my spirituality. I'm going to pump myself up right now. Like, I feel the
Do it.
closest I've ever been to my faith and Jesus and all that in these last 2 years, talking to you and everything, than I've ever had in my entire life. In my entire life.
Mm,
Through deep, meaningful conversation about what does this mean? How does this happen? I don't know. I have no, but I feel closer in that.
yeah.
And I think it's also because, like I was telling Michelle, is like talking to someone like yourself, who we struggle with it similarly.
Mm,
And a lot of times when people are in religion, they almost claim not to struggle with it. It's like very blind. It's like this is just how it is. I'm like, there's just got to be some struggle with it.
there is a celebration of blind faith that goes on, and I think most of that goes back to Abraham
Mm.
and when he's told to sacrifice his son Isaac. And whether you're a Jewish person who doesn't believe Jesus is, the sacrificial
Right.
lamb, or whether you're a Christian person who does believe that, they're both celebrating the fact that Abraham would just obey God.
Yeah.
I'm putting myself in God's shoes. I'm like, dude, I just told you to slit your son's throat on an altar. Why aren't you giving any pushback on this?
Yeah.
What kind of a creep are you? You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like, I don't care that I'm God. If I tell you to do something crazy like that, I expect an argument about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I expect you to like say no because I expect you to love your child, you
Yeah.
know? And to Jesus's point, putting humanity before divinity, if a Christian I mean, in our society today, if a Christian hears of a guy who thought he heard God tell him to kill his own son, they say he's crazy.
Right.
Why don't you think Abraham was crazy?
Right.
Just because they wrote about him in a book,
Right.
you think he wasn't crazy?
Right. The same does not apply according to that.
Yeah,
It's
you know.
I find that very strange. I just think, and so for me, I think the fracture for me, which actually made it better for me and got me closer, was the whole discussion around uh people being gay,
Mm,
lesbian. That was the beginning of that for me throughout the years in the back. I was like, I'm questioning this.
yeah,
And I think if you think that's wrong because you think it's this very straightforward thing, I think that's the blind part. It's like, I was like, no, no way, man. There's no way God cares as much about someone's sexuality. There's just no way. It's like, this is a
and you
people
know,
thing. I feel like this is I kept saying to myself, this is a people thing, clearly.
yeah,
It's a people thing. This is not a God thing. This is clearly a human people bias, not a God thing.
And the moment a religious person brings up scripture to try and prove their point, they've lost the argument.
They've lost.
Because one of the biggest reasons is that these ancient peoples didn't even have a word for homosexuality.
Right.
They didn't sit around identifying gender and sexuality. That wasn't an issue.
No.
You know, as far as being gay or not gay, a lot of people want to just, gloss over this fact. But the problem with homosexuality, as far as man on man, wasn't that the act itself was so despicable, because, and we can say this with confidence because, and I don't want to get too graphic about it, but who was punished for being involved in that act? It wasn't the guy. It was the guy who was the female version, right?
Sure.
It was the
Sure.
receiver, not the giver
receiver,
of the
yeah.
sex act. Because that person had been emasculated and been basically become an effeminate man.
Mm-hmm.
So now but the guy who was giving, he's not punished. He's fine.
Right.
When you take that into account, you're just like, oh, so it's not homosexuality that's bad. It's being emasculated and having your manhood taken from you by having someone else perform this act on you.
Right.
That's bad. I mean, it's
a
so
human thing.
up.
Yeah, it's
It's
messed
so
up.
messed
It's
up.
messed up. Has nothing to do with God. Nothing.
And when you break it down and you actually know what the culture was, and you know how they were actually dealing with these things, you're just like, oh, well, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, maybe we shouldn't use that as a
Yeah.
model for modern society. You know? Oh man,
It's crazy, right? But then in one sense to say God loves everyone, no matter what. He loves all of his children. But then on the other hand to say, well, not gay people.
yeah,
Like that's ridiculous. Like that's so hypocritical. It's like that's a people thing. It has
it
nothing to
is
do with God. You made that shit up. It's
totally.
like
It's a God thing only in as much as people have created God.
right. It's like seriously. I'm like, think about the level of hypocrisy on both sides of the whole thing. I'm like, come on, man, really? I'm like, let's go again. As like we said, I think we say this every episode, but it's probably good to remember the original context of this is the most important, right? Like love other people.
Yeah,
It's not a caveat to that. Love other
exactly.
people.
Yeah, when Jesus said, "As I have loved you, love one another," and when he said things like, "No greater man hath no greater love hath man than this," then he laid down his life for his brother. Once, just like you said, there was no caveat to
There's no
that.
caveat.
There was no unless they were trans. You know, I mean, unless they're Democrat,
Yeah.
unless they're,
But that's what it is now. It's like,
yeah,
but you're like this. No,
yeah,
there's nothing. There's no, it's the end of the sentence. The sentence, there's no addendum. There's no redaction. There's nothing. Like, remember, this is what it is. Pretty simple.
and how does Jesus display love? By saying, "Neither do I condemn you. Therefore, you cannot condemn anyone, no matter how much you might disagree with them. Therefore, you cannot judge them. You cannot work against them. You cannot try to stone them, even in trying to pass a law against them, if that makes sense, for wanting to be the person they want to be. Now, if that person is hurting somebody else, you can
Sure.
pass a law, say, don't kill,
Yeah.
you know, but to pass a law to say you can't be who you want to be, or to try and make it more difficult for that person to be who they want to be and identify as they want to identify, there possibly couldn't be anything more unchristian
Yeah.
than that.
Exactly. It comes out both sides of the mouth all the time, and it's just like, all right, that's why I think like the fracture is there, is because you're saying one thing, but then the opposite is happening all the time. Hey, everyone, come here, be a part of this, unless you got
Yeah.
this issue. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Oh man, this is years ago on the Daily Show, and they went to one of these Democratic conventions,
Yeah.
during an election cycle, and they were just interviewing these great people at this convention and celebrating that they're the big tent party.
Yeah.
Everybody's welcome here. And then the people who are there doing the interviewing, there's like, but what about the super conservative whatever, and they're like, well, I mean, not them, we don't want that. It's like it's a big tent except for certain people who think a certain way.
Yeah. But it's for everyone.
Yeah.
It's so hypocritical.
Yeah, so I mean, it's everybody's doing it. It's
Yeah.
not exclusive to Democrat, Republican,
Yeah.
Christian, Muslim. It doesn't matter, man. Everybody's
No.
just wanting everybody's saying members only. Everybody's hanging a members only sign on the door.
The
Everybody's
jacket,
doing it.
everything. They got the members only jacket, it's an exclusive club. Well, not really. It's for everyone, but you got to know the secret
Whatever.
thing.
But you got to know the handshake. You got to
Yeah,
know the
come on. I mean,
password. I
we're
mean,
just saying for everybody out front, but we don't really
yeah.
mean that. It's no, Jesus would not be happy about this. He'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. I mean, what happened in this game of phone tag we're playing? Like, you guys screwed this up big time. Like,
Yeah.
that's when he flips over the table. He's like, wait a minute. I didn't say that. Like,
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Raisin in the Sun?
yes.
Yeah. Isn't that such a perfectly done movie? And
Yes.
one of the haunting things about that movie, so they get the actor who does the voice of Piglet in the Walt Disney Winnie the Pooh series. So he has this sweet little timid voice, and he is just by appearance sweet, timid looking. You wouldn't think this guy would be capable of evil acts just by looking at him and talking and hearing his voice and things. So the great thing about casting him in the role he was cast in is he was basically the neighborhood representative who's telling this black family, maybe you shouldn't move into our neighborhood. I know you can afford to move in. I know that you're buying this house fair and square just like any other person, but you're black and we're white. And he
Yeah.
doesn't say that. What he says is, we just don't know if you'd be comfortable there in our neighborhood. That is people who want to say racism doesn't exist. They're not thinking about that type of racism.
Right.
They're not thinking about the idea that, oh yeah, anyone can move into this neighborhood, but this neighborhood doesn't want you here.
Yeah.
I can go into any church, but once they get a whiff of this kind of a conversation that you and I are having, they're not going to want me there.
Did you see these two guys walking and a hand comes up? Hey, like, what's your stance on gay, lesbian? Because as soon as you do that, they'll be like, well, I love my gay and lesbian brothers, but what they're doing is wrong. Done. Stop.
Yep.
like, no, that's your personal issue. That has nothing to do with. No, come on. You just said God loves all people. like, like, period. You should not care about this sexual orientation or how people practice sex, like, unless it's like really like hurting someone, like it's a crime or something. Like,
Yeah. I mean, rape, absolutely.
absolutely,
But consensual.
right. And say, oh, God created the earth by so and so. I'm like, how do you know that? Like, I don't know that.
Yeah.
Who knows that actually? Like, It's like it's
Yeah.
okay to have these questions. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean you don't believe. And I think, Simon, that's one of the biggest, I think, high points. If you when you listen to this podcast, people are listening, is it's okay to believe and have questions and explore those
Yeah.
questions and be open to whatever the answers are to that. And I think often, at least I can't speak for Simon, I speak for myself, it's often strengthened my faith in having those questions. For me personally, I just feel freer in that sense. There's just like
Yeah.
it's hard to believe in something that would be like, well, gay people are bad. I'm like, really? I'm not into that. Like, that's no. I choose to be like, that's something people made, like a big issue. Like people made that. It's like
Exactly.
it's not. No.
I mean, think of Jesus being a fear monger
Mm.
on one of these, whether it's like CNBC or Fox
Yeah.
News or something like that. Think of Jesus going on one of these channels and being one of these people who like fear mongers
How great
against,
would that be?
I mean, it would just be so out of character, for Jesus
Right.
the fear monger. Instead, the Jesus that we get in the New Testament, well, he's kind of different in every gospel, obviously,
Yeah.
but generally what we get is somebody with a supreme confidence in being not on the defensive, but
Right.
on the offensive when it comes to love, charity, meekness, kindness. I just revisited the Beatitudes recently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was just really struck by, what you and I have constantly commented on about this aggressive form of
Yeah,
Christianity.
it's the warrior Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. And the way and reading the Beatitudes again and reading Jesus say, the meek shall inherit the earth, and these types of things, and the first shall be last and the last shall be first, and these kinds of things where Jesus, he just doesn't champion warriors. He
Huh.
doesn't champion strength, especially that kind of physical type of
Yeah.
strength. He champions inner strength, the kind
Yes.
of strength that can endure hardship, and after enduring hardship, being able to, um I guess in the terminology of the gospels, receive their reward,
Yeah.
after enduring, but you don't win it through aggression. you
No.
don't you don't
No.
win it by overpowering somebody else.
No. And Jesus actually, if I really thought about this, this could be an interesting idea. I don't know. I'll have to talk to you about this off camera, but I think I think you and me are particularly equipped for this type of thing. I don't know, but I imagine if you were actually interviewing Jesus, it honestly, like if you look at it in pop culture, it'd be pretty boring. Probably wouldn't be a great interview because he's not going to give you what you want. He's not going to give
Yeah.
you the salaciousness. He's Jesus. What do you think about gay people? I love all people. I love
Yeah.
all people. Beautiful. But
Yeah.
aren't they doing what's wrong? And then Jesus would hit him with the parable or something. He'd probably give a couple things,
Yeah.
like, but it would be like pretty simple. It's like a pretty simple thing. Like, I don't know. I mean, what are you guilty of? Like, it would be something like that.
The beauty of Jesus is his simplicity.
The simplicity. Yeah.
That's the beauty of all of his teachings. Profound simplicity, which leaves it open to so much interpretation.
Yeah.
But I don't think it leaves it open to the kind of interpretation that we're seeing from Christian
Yes.
churches, that we've seen from Christian churches for 2,000 years. I just don't think any kind of every knee shall bow and every,
Yeah.
I mean, doing that via violence, doing that via conquest, doing that, via um, colonialization.
Right.
I, I I just don't think there's any argument to be had for those types of things when reading the Gospels. I just don't
Yeah.
see that anywhere.
Anywhere. Like anywhere. Like,
Yeah.
Oh man, Simon, we're wrapping this up. You know what time it is. I never forget this.
Well, I know it's not time to discuss aliens.
No, we'll save that the next time. But you know what? In my quest on this, and I think I want to always try my best to subscribe to the very basic tenets for Jesus. Love God, love others, and especially in the loving others, man. This is my mission every day. This podcast has made me distill this down very clearly. Let me love the people in my life. Let me love other people. Man, I love you. You're an awesome guy.
Love
And
you too, brother.
yeah, man, you've done wonders for my life. Seriously. Like the intellectual discussion, the friendship, it's more than I could ask for. And that so I'm grateful. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I as well. The way that we've affected each other is just a beautiful thing, and I love it.
Yeah, same here, man. Listen, another awesome episode. And I mean, you look so polished today. I mean, I tell you what, man, you got the music, all the guitars back there. This is a guy, man. This is an important person. Okay, maybe
You
only
might
to
have heard of
Simon,
me.
but
I'm,
just
I'm kind of a big deal.
yeah, he's kind of. Let's just forget the love. Let's just be very narcissistic. Thank you,
Oh, God.
Simon.
Thank you. Talk to you
All right,
soon.
man.